What's up, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of Merricks Garage. Killer burb news. But before we get into all that, right down there, that subscribe button, go ahead and smash it. Get subscribed to my channel. Keep up to date with me and help me grow my numbers. Yeah, it's really looking good. I mean, look at that ride height. Look at that stance. I am fired up on this. But I have had a couple of scary moments today that we're going to get into. I thought for a moment that I may have completely screwed up the transplant of the powertrain. And things weren't lining up the way they should. I may have it resolved, I may not. Let's get into the details. It's still in mock-up phase, but I fabbed up this little bracket today for the PSC RAM. So let's run through the ports on the Hydro Boost. You've got high pressure coming from the box, then you've got high pressure high pressure coming up from the pump, going down to the box. This is extra overflow or return line, so this is going to go straight back into the reservoir. Running down to the pump, you'll see this is the high pressure side, this is the low pressure side. High pressure comes in, low pressure returns back up to the box. So these two are returning fluid back to the reservoir. This one delivers the fluid back down to the pump. Pretty effective system. It's just got a lot of hoses and lines that you got to get routed, and you want to keep them as short as possible, and especially on these feed lines like this guy. You do not want a long run if you can avoid it, and you don't want something that's got loops or kinks or has to go uphill or anything like that. So I think I'm making progress. This is all nicely mounted. It's all just hand tight right now, but we're getting there. It's time to get this exhaust done. And here's a new one for me. I have not built an exhaust before, so this is going to be interesting. How hard can it be? It's a couple of bends and some tubing. I'm sure I'm gonna regret saying that. But here's what I've got right now, starting off. This is the Cummins flange. I'll put the part numbers down below. Or actually, the part number is going to be in a build sheet that I'm putting together. But this mates up to the turbo. So I'm gonna start tacking some of this stuff together and seeing how it looks in there. Okay, so it's not the best welding I've ever done, but it's gonna work, I think, and hold everything on here. Let's drop this guy in and see how it looks. It's starting to line up. Very stoked on how this is kind of looking. I think I'm gonna have to maybe clearance a little down here. We'll have to see. And now I'm just working on hangers for it. But yeah, kind of stoked on how this is going together. It's not all that, well, let's be honest here, it's not that big of a project. It's a couple of tubes. I can do this. Well, it turns out that making exhaust is pretty fun. I am just taking this kit that I got that comes with 90s, it comes with elbows, it comes with 45 straights, and I'm cutting it till it fits. So I've got this flex pipe in here, which I'm not sure if I put this in the right place, because I'm now getting a lot of movement out of this, but I think I can counter that by tensioning it when I put the next piece in. So that piece on the floor, I'm gonna tack it together and I'll show you what it looks like in here. It's tight, but it clears really well. And what I like about it is it totally snuck up underneath the frame rail. You can't even see the exhaust because it's right there. This is another valve body for air. I just put it up there because I know I'm going to be running it later, so. So it's just, it's free hanging right now, which is fine because I've still got to do some more mock-up. But I'm really happy with how it came out. And the shifter is nice and tight. You can see the shifter base back in there. This is close. Man, I'm glad I did that body lift like Steven suggested. It's coming together. I say that every day, and it's true. Every day I'm making progress. I gotta show you guys how I'm gonna be shifting this beast because I've started to grow another shifter farm in here. This is the triple stick for the doubler. So much like the Magnum box, I'm gonna have the range selector on the 203, and then I'm gonna have rear drive shaft, front drive shaft. So there'll be 3 positions. There'll be neutral, there'll be low, and then there will be high. And then this one will basically run in 1-to-1 or reduction. And then I've got the 5-speed right there. So I technically have, that's 5 times 4. I've got 20 speeds. I mean, I won't be using them all, but kind of fun to think of the possibilities. I am really, really happy with how the shifters came out. They almost look factory. Well, they will when it's being cleaned up. But let's pull the body off and I'll show you guys what it looks like underneath. So this is the triple stick shifter. Unlike on my Blazer, which is a direct linkage, this is using cables. I'm not generally a huge fan of cables. Once the housing breaks, they don't work as well. But that has generally been due to a poor install on my part. So I've ordered up 3 new cables in 6-foot lengths. Yeah, I'm going big. I'm basically planning on doing a big loop around. So the cable is coming back into the shifter from this angle with a nice straight run. I'm gonna be building off of this a bracket down to here that will give a straight shot and fixate the cables at the other end. This is going to be getting welded in, and it mounts nicely to the doubler and gives me a really good position for the shifters. This was not easy to get in. It's been quite a bit of work. I had to cut and grind and flap disc a lot of stuff to get it to fit properly, but the hole through the floor is minimal and the ergonomics of where the shifters are is perfect. One of my most useful tools is this electrolysis tank. All it does is remove rust. I put this in there for a couple hours and look at the difference. So I'm gonna drop all these guys in today and we'll see what happens. So essentially all this does, you hook up the positive to this, the negative to the piece that's in the tank. As electrons flow from the positive to the negative, you get a release of ions on the material. So Rust is basically iron and oxygen. If you add an extra electron, the bond is broken, the oxygen's released, no more rust. It's super easy, super cool, and saves a lot of elbow grease. So let's throw this in and take a look at these in a couple hours. So why hydro boost instead of just a regular vacuum boost? Well, diesel engines do not produce much vacuum, and so the braking would be inefficient. Instead, we're using the hydro boost, which uses pressure that's generated off of the power steering pump. In fact, I'm actually going to be using a standalone accessory vacuum pump to run all the climate controls. So this will be mounted and just generate vacuum through electricity. I've got the hydro boost all set up now. I still might need to change a couple of fittings. I think this is going to get swapped out for a 90 and maybe these guys swapped out for a 90. I'm not sure, but everything's plumbed. I have all the fittings and adapters that were needed. The reservoir is mounted. The proportioning valve is mounted. Everything's off of the mount right here. Stoked on how this is looking. If you want to know why Tom Wood's drive shafts is so popular, it's because they're quite honestly the easiest to deal with. They make fantastic drive shafts. They stand behind their product and they get it to you so quickly. I came home last night to find these sitting on my doorstep. Look at these beauts. Front drive shaft and rear drive shaft. I have a reverse, I call it an agricultural spline. It's a heavy duty front drive shaft, 1350. I don't know the wall diameter, but I'm guessing it is substantial. And by putting the male splines down on the differential side, you're increasing the engagement and therefore the strength out of the female side. I've had some bad experiences in the past where when I've had my female end down on the yoke, I've exploded them a couple times due to torque shear. So spoke with Sean at Tom Woods and he suggested this and I agreed. It's going up to this flange that will be going into the 205. And I can't wait to throw these in. Let's drop them in a second here. But let's talk about this rear drive shaft. That is a huge joint. That is a 1410. That's a 1350. That's a 1410. And it's most apparent when you take a look at these yokes. These double cardons. Look at the size difference. Let's move this guy up so you can truly see the side by side. Look at that yoke. Look at that yoke. Not that 1350 is undersized by any stretch of the imagination. It isn't. It's massive. 1410 is just even more massive. But I'm going to be putting a lot of torque through these guys. And it's going to be rad. That is awesome. I'm so fired up. Look at this. Front and rear drive shafts, limit straps, brake lines. I've even got a parking brake on it. Still in mock-up, but you get the idea. Big shout out to these guys. Tom Woods Custom Drive Shafts, man. These guys get it done. Trail tested, competition proven, and show quality. That's the trifecta, right? So let's talk about my day of panic, because I was convinced that I had royally screwed up something. You see, my output flange of my transfer case is sitting driver's side by about 2, almost 3 inches. And that was concerning because the flange should be oriented off of the crank. You got your crank running straight through, you got your transmission output running straight to the transfer case, and the output should be right at the end of all that. But mine wasn't, and I couldn't figure out why. And I still really don't have a good answer as to why it's doing that, because the crank is centered perfectly. And when you come to the side, the engine it's not cockeyed. But check this out. This is what was giving me palpitations yesterday. I've got now a compound angle, which means the drive shaft is not just running an angle up here, up and down, it's also running one side to side. And I wasn't sure if that was going to affect harmonics or anything like that. And I was convinced that I was going to need to pull my engine and transmission and realign everything. And full disclosure, I don't know how this is going to present itself in the real world, whether it's going to vibrate or I just don't know. And I hate unknowns. But I spoke to Sean at Tom Woods for a while, and he reassured me that the angle that I'm seeing, although not ideal, isn't that big of a deal. The drive shaft will be able to accommodate some of it. It's about 4 degrees, which when you stretch it out over the length of the 55-inch drive shaft is pretty negligible. But I'm a perfectionist. It drove me crazy, and I had some oh crap moments for quite a while yesterday. In the end, I decided just to sleep on it and to live to fight another day. So thankfully, after talking with Sean, my fears were allayed. But I guess I won't really know until I get this thing on the road. And that's part of the challenge of a build like this. There have been, probably 24 little things that I'm just like, I think that's how it's supposed to be. Or I think that's on a right. But, you know, the real test is when you start driving this thing. And my biggest fear is not that, you know, a problem arises, because I expect that to happen. My biggest fear is that a problem arises that I really do not have an easy solution to. I mean, if I get out there and this thing vibrates from like crazy from like 25 to 75, I'm in trouble. And that will mean pulling the body and basically doing a ton of work. I don't even want to think about that. So let's move on. But that was a stressful day for me. But I guess my takeaway from this is, when you have one of those days like I did, sometimes the clarity of the next day is what's needed. You know, you can get so fixated on what you're dealing with at that moment that you don't really take a step back and look at the big picture. And the big picture is, I'm getting very close, the angle is insignificant, and hopefully it won't affect anything that much. Let's wait and see.
Okay, here's the nastiness afterwards, but you see all of this buildup on these pieces of rebar and how rusted they are? That's from all the rust leaving the pieces that I put in here. And here's the pieces I just took out. So where it's most noticeable, you can kind of see how it just starts to fall off. Let's find a part that has some. Look at that. Let's clean these guys all up.
Okay, this piece has come out fairly good. There's a little bit of nooks and crannies I can't get into. But what I can do is chase all these threads. I highly recommend doing that. Let me turn off my light here. I highly recommend chasing threads. It just makes for the final install a lot easier, knowing that the threads are good. Yeah, and there you go. That's the amount of dirt I just pulled out of those bolts. So that's why I like to do that, because you can never really get that stuff out unless you chase the threads. 3 years ago, this month, I drove down to Riverside to pick up this beast. I put together a cool video right here that's got me and my youngest son road tripping down to Riverside to pick it up and all the fun we had along the way. You guys should check it out, and I'll see you next week. Merricks Garage.